a time when people took care of each other. His dad was an insurance salesman, and while they weren't rich, there were a lot of people who were far worse off. Bill grew up in a family of loving, caring people, and that molded his future life. I'm told that Bill would often recount to family members how his mother would often feed strangers that just were down on their luck and didn't have any food. That same sense of honor and duty also led to one of the greatest regrets of Bill's life. When all of his friends marched into the enlistment centers of World War II, he was right there with them, only to be turned down because of a heart murmur. This inability to serve his country in its greatest time of need left him with a huge sense of failure, and a sense of failure that was only compounded when so many of his acquaintances, even his very best friend, failed to return from the conflict. But life goes on, and Bill determined to get an education. He wasn't sure what to study, but after getting a suggestion from his dad, go into air conditioning, that's where the future lies. Bill enrolled in and graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with a degree in mechanical engineering. And he used that degree to do just what his dad suggested, working with several air conditioning companies until finally retiring from the Carrier Corporation in 1990. And it was during this early education stage of Bill's life when something happened that I believe we see the fruits of today. Bill began working at the Washburn Dairy Company, a local dairy farm that produced milk and other dairy items, and Washburn had a store where they sold their product to the public. Bill got a job as a soda jerk in that store. It just so happens that Washburn Dairy Farm also had a basketball team, a team that played other businesses in the area and high school teams. This team was known as the Washburn Jerks. And I'm pretty sure that Bill's love of basketball was the genesis of what we all know to be one of Ken's passions as well. After college, Bill began his search for a life partner. But evidently it wasn't all that easy. I'm told he dated lots of girls, but he just couldn't find the right one. He began to think even that he might not ever get married. And so he resorted to going to singles classes at the local churches to hopes of meeting a good girl. Well, and that happened finally at the Methodist church. Bill met Pat, and she knew right away she was the right one, and his love affair with Pat began then. But although it began then, it took a little while, I understand, for Bill to actually pop the question. I heard a story of how Bill took Pat skiing up in the mountains one day, and they got up there, and unfortunately Bill's car broke down. They had to get a bus to bring them back to town, and it's my understanding that on that bus, Bill proposed to you that day. And I also think I've heard that the thought running through your mind, Pat, was something like, it's about time. After marriage, Pat gave up a very good job with NBC in New York City with working in advertising sales, a job that, by the way, allowed her to meet such notable people as Jonathan Winters and actually to become a lifelong friend of Earl Hamner, who you probably know was the creator of the Waltons. But she gave up that job so that she and Bill could move into the stage of their life that really defined who they are, and that's the raising of their family. Now, I must admit that I was somewhat apprehensive about how to convey to you who Bill Sauer was, what his true character was. I had only met Bill one time previously, I think, when he came to visit Ken down here. And I wasn't real sure how to go about this. But as Ken and I sat down and talked a few days ago, I realized that I really did know Bill Sauer because I know you, Ken. As you described your dad and shared your memories of his life, I came to see just how much the two of you are really alike. Ken, you described your dad as loving outdoor activities, skiing, basketball, fishing, tennis, actually continuing to play tennis all the way up into his 80s. I couldn't help but smile at the similarity of athleticism, because we all know Ken is a very outdoorsy, athletic person. You recounted to me how Bill had a really goofy, silly side to him. He loved acting silly in order to entertain other folks, even at his own expense. You said that you find yourself acting the same way at times, although I'm sure there's a lot of people in here that might argue that point. But nonetheless, you told me about the time that you were at church here and you were acting really silly. Didn't know that Barbara Jackson came into the room behind you, and you turned around to see Barbara laughing so hard that tears were running down her face. And as all our ushers know, as a matter of fact, I happened to witness it myself this morning. It's not uncommon for Ken to act like he's dropping one of the offering plates as he's handing them out to the ushers on Sunday mornings. Ken, you told me about your dad loving to sing hymns in church on Sunday morning. Said actually that he thought the music was the best part of church. And you remembered standing next to your dad singing, both of you holding onto the hymnal, and him acting like he was going to drop his side of the hymnal just to scare you a little bit. Well, like I said, I witnessed that very thing this morning. I think you too. And you said, Ken, I guess that's where I get that thing with the offering plates. Mm-hmm. Bill loved to do new things. Loved to plan family activities. Ken, you described to me the time that you guys took 3 weeks off from work to take his family on a camping trip out west, where you camped in tents and you saw all of the sights like Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Mount Rushmore, the Grand Tetons, all the sights. Was a great trip, evidently. But most of all, Bill Sauer was a family man, giving his kids every opportunity to be successful in life, encouraging them, always including them in everything. And he must have done a great job at it, having 3 successful children who love him tremendously and a wife who was devoted to him. But that same love didn't stop with his children. It extended right on down to the grandkids as well, 4 grandchildren. Ken, you remembered how every time he saw Owen, although he was already suffering with dementia at that time, Bill would say, boy, he sure is cute. And Mary Ellen, I've heard that Bill was really proud of you. I'm told that he said, you're going to be the first woman president. Unless Hillary gets it first. I'm sure that Bill Sauer loved all of his children equally, but since we're sort of partial to one of them, I'm going to talk about that relationship a little bit now. Bill and Pat evidently knew all along that little Kenny was going to be a pastor. Ken, you talked of a time when you were about 3 years old and you were watching a television show that centered on angels, had angels as the topic, and you said that you were just absolutely glued to the television, couldn't turn away from it. And your mom and dad both agreed that day that Kenny would someday be a pastor. You said that they encouraged you to enter the ministry, that your dad gave you the freedom to grow and to try out different things, but that he still kept his hand on the reins. Your dad was very, very proud that you went into the ministry. And even after you were a grown man with a family of your own, you could call your dad at any time and he would listen as long as necessary. And you respected his point of view. Bill loved conversations about life, about religion, politics, just about everything else. But then the evil of dementia came in and took that away from you. Ken, as we were talking the other day, you called your dad your best friend. More than once. As the father of 2 sons, I can't think of a higher tribute that any man could receive. You know, it's because of the life and the witness of another son that those of us who call ourselves Christian know with certainty that the separation caused by death is just a brief speck on God's eternal plot. Though we're apart now, one day we will be rejoined, and that reunion will be forever. Because of the life and the witness of Jesus Christ, we know the true character of his Father God. John 14:7 says this, if you really know me, you will know my Father as well. And it's through the life of Jesus Christ that we know our Father God loves us more than we can even comprehend. That he grieves when we grieve, that he weeps when we weep, that he's waiting with open arms to welcome us to an amazing eternity with him where there is no more pain, no more tears, no more separation, no more dementia. Ken, for nearly 8 years, you have stood by us through the passing of loved ones, through hospitalizations, through sickness, through just about every crisis you could imagine. We want you to know that we stand by you now. We love you, Claire, Miriam, Owen, Pat, all of you. If you need an ear to listen to, a shoulder to cry on, we're here for you, and we promise that we'll keep you in our prayers. Would you join me in prayer, please?